Welcome and thank you for joining us for another live episode of Teachers for Teachers. That's you, moms and dads. I'm Dr. Dejana and I'm here again with Dr. Leah. Hello, Leah.
Hello, Dr. Dejana. I'm so happy to be here. And this topic, looking at access and equity, has become such a focal point for our culture right now. And I've been doing everything I can to educate myself. And I'm floored by what I didn't know. I'm challenged by some of the things that I hadn't thought of as problematic in the past that I now am looking at differently. And I really welcome this conversation. And I think we're going to ask Tim Griffith to join us in this today, aren't we?
Yes, absolutely. I'm excited about this conversation too. Before we dive into equity and access, which is huge right now, especially, locally for us, we live in a county that is on the coronavirus watch list, which means all of our schools will be going distance learning. And remote learning. And so it's highlighting some of the issues around equity and access for sure. But let me go ahead and introduce Tim. I'm so excited to have Tim join us again. Hey, everybody out there. Tim Griffin is a retired STEM teacher and award winning singer, songwriter, and storyteller. He's the founder and director of Griffin Ed, a nonprofit team of educators and musicians dedicated to raising academic achievement in STEM through educational music. Go
Woo!
ahead and say hello, Tim. We're so happy to have you.
Hello again. It's a privilege to be here with y'all.
Thank you. So
Awesome.
I think we should dive right into some music to start this conversation because I think
Okay.
that's one of the things I always enjoy when Tim's in the room.
Uh, all right, then let's see here. Let me check my tuning. I'm going to share a song that's actually kind of on the theme that we're looking at today. All right. In the early 1800s, a little boy one day asked his father why some men were slaves. And his father said, "Oh son, it's been that way since the world begun. So why do you have to be the one who's always making waves?" But the boy kept asking questions. When he grew to be a man, he became our greatest president. His name was Abraham. He signed the law that freed the slaves, which only goes to show mighty oaks from little acorns grow. A little girl in Alabama asked her ma one day, "Why are the white folks treating us this way? Why do they set their dogs on us and make me sit in the back of the bus?" Her ma shook her head and then she just said, "It's always been that way." But the girl grew up and when the driver said, "Get back with the other darks," she told him she would not be moved. Her name was Rosa Parks. Little girl's courage fell deep into old Jim Crow. Mighty oaks from little acorns grow. There was a great young minister named Martin Luther King. When people yelled, he taught them how to sing. And they sang, "We will not go on this way, and we shall overcome someday." Remember that when people say you can't do anything, 'cause from an acorn grows a tree. Takes hold upon the land, turns desert into forest, making topsoil out of sand. And even though it sometimes takes 1,000 years or so, mighty oaks from little acorns grow. Now when you think that you can't change the things you know are wrong, just think about the people in this song. You've got to do what you know is right and struggle with all your light, 'cause even the darkest night is followed by dawn. And even if it takes 1,000 years, I swear we're gonna win. You know it doesn't matter where you're from or the color of your skin. I know it won't be easy, but I tell you, even so, mighty oaks from Little Acorns grow. Mighty oaks from Little Acorns grow.
If I were braver, I could have sang along because I know every word to that song. I have played it many times in the car with the kids. And it makes me tear up every time I think about it, because we don't think about Rosa Parks as a child or Abraham Lincoln as a child. And that song really does evoke a desire to stand up for what's right.
Thank you.
Dejana, you're muted. There.
Yeah, I'm here, Tim. I just love how you always share music. And I think music is a great tool when it comes to equity. I mean, it brings everyone together, and there's an easy access point. So when you have to have hard and uncomfortable conversations about race and diversity and inclusion and equity, something that a tool that you might want to use to enter into that conversation might be through song. Because let's be honest, a lot of
Mhm.
people don't know what to say or how to engage in
Yeah.
conversation around this. And so thank you all for sharing.
It seems to Thank you. It seems to me that that's one of the main things the arts can offer to us at a cultural level, is they help us access issues that might be hard to hear or hard to talk about or hard to listen to if we just kind of have let's just sit down and talk about this. But you think about Star Trek, for example, in the 1960s when that came on television. They had, think about the Starship Enterprise. They've got an African American woman who's the number 4 officer on a Starfleet vessel. She's in charge of communications, and she gives orders to people and they follow them. They've got an Asian guy driving the ship. They've got a Russian guy at the weapons panel, and everyone is getting along and talking to each other. And about a third of the stories, when you look at the original series, deal with racism and prejudice in one way or another. But because it's aliens and because it's happening in a faraway place, we can deal with the issues and we can learn lessons from it that maybe aren't quite so painful because they aren't hitting quite so close to home. Or I think it was Pablo Picasso who painted a painting called Guernica.
Guernica, that was Pablo.
That was Picasso, and that was a horrifying war crime, where the Germans were developing developing the airplane into a weapon of war, and they gave it a field test in the town of Guernica, and it was a nightmare, and people couldn't believe what they were reading in the newspapers and hearing about on the radio. Nobody would do that. The Germans are civilized people; they're like us. They wouldn't go do something like what we're hearing about. It's impossible. That must be fake news, right? And yet when Picasso took it and put it in a picture and people looked at it and they went, and all of a sudden it was real. And so some people say that the arts can be the lie that helps us to see the truth.
Oh, beautifully said.
Well, thanks. I wish I made it up, but I didn't.
But I wonder, where are we with this now? Because I agree with you that all of things like the Star Trek and a lot of these series, they deal with the issues that we want to grapple with, but have not been doing a very good job. So maybe the mighty oak is now strong enough in this current culture to really see change applied. Do you see this as different, Dejana, than other times?
Well, this is the time that I'm living, so I'm going to say yes, for sure. And I'm wondering if we can embrace the arts, I'm sure over the years we have, as a tool for increasing our cultural competency and
Mhm.
cultural responses to the moment. You know what I mean? Do you know what I mean talking about, Tim? I wonder if
Yeah.
that could be a tool. What are your thoughts on music, the arts, and cultural competence and cultural responsiveness?
Well, I think the arts have always kind of been a way to for people of different racial groups where we may not be able to eat in the same restaurants if you go back a few decades. We can't stay in the same hotels, but we can listen to each other's music. You think about Nat King Cole, for example. He was the first African American to have his own TV show. And my grandmother got in trouble with her parents because she was in really into Nat King Cole, and they were worried that forgive me for using some harsh language. They were afraid that she might get a certain kind of fever from watching Nat King Cole, and yeah, but it and ultimately we weren't ready as a country because they kept losing sponsors on the TV show. A lot of people don't know this story that he had his show and it was the number one TV show and he could go on for a couple of hours every evening telling stories and talking and singing and so beautiful, such a lovely voice and piano player, but they kept losing sponsors. And when they asked Chevrolet, for example, why they dropped their sponsorship of the show, it was because they were getting feedback from a lot of customers that people were starting to think of the Chevrolet as a black car, a car for black people. And so Chevrolet pulled out. And it's horrifying now. It's hard to believe that would happen, but somebody has to be the first one to do it. And and because he broke that ground a generation or two later, it stops being a big deal. And what I'm hoping for is that a generation from now, that the kids who are watching what's happening today, when I discuss it with them, we have to acknowledge to a large degree the rise in white nationalism we are seeing in the United States right now is a reaction against having our first African American president. We had a black president. He was, and okay, there he is. It happened. And a lot of white folks just lost their minds completely about it. And I wouldn't have expected it, but it happened. And what I'm hoping will happen is the next time we get an African American president, it won't be such a big deal. And after it's happened a few times, it just won't be much of a thing anymore. Kind of like with the Irish, where you may remember when John F. Kennedy was running for president. A lot of people were wondering, can a Catholic be a president? Really? I mean, isn't he going to be beholden to the Pope? And John F. Kennedy said that wouldn't be a problem for him. And lo and behold, there were some problems with his presidency, but being a Catholic was not one of them.
Isn't that
And
the truth?
and so nowadays, when we get an Irish American candidate for president, it's not a thing. Oh, I'm drawing a blank. John McCain ran for president, and nobody thought of him as the Irish American candidate for president. He was just an American. Likewise with Italian Americans. Imagine having, a guy with a name like Giuliani running for president 30 years ago. Couldn't happen.
Right.
So we do make progress, and it's never easy, but it's happening. And this is part of it.
Yeah, and I guess my curiosity about timing is really like we've seen protests over the last couple of decades.
Yep.
Something will happen, people get up in arms. But we haven't seen anything as prolonged as this. And that's when I was asking, like, is it different? Is this different? Can we maintain the protests long enough to make significant change? And we lost Dejana. She's been having internet trouble. So she's not going to be able to engage in that part of the question unless she makes it back. But this is really, there are so many things in our culture over this last few years that we think, well, when that happened, definitely we're going to make change. We're going to address the gun laws when 20-some children are massacred, and we didn't. And now with everything that's going on around the country and what we're watching right now in Portland, Oregon, is not a good sign, because I do think you're right that it's an unfortunate backlash to having a black president, and a black president who, whether you agreed with his politics or not, he was a man of character. He is a man of character.
Yeah.
And there were no embarrassing scandals during his time in the White House.
Yeah.
And now, what is going on?
Yeah, I remember fondly. One of the things you don't really think about is the things that are not happening. And for 8 years, when Obama was president, I wasn't having to explain his behavior to my colleagues from other countries.
Right.
And you know, because I have a lot of friends, I get to make music with people in Germany and Britain and you know and Canada, and you know, for 8 years there was never you know, nothing that really made them worry. I remember there was a scandal where he wore a tan suit one time.
Yes.
And my friends in other countries were just like, yeah, that's okay. You know, they didn't need me to explain how really it's okay the president wears a tan suit. You know. Anyway, though, since we're back to something we've seen on television thousands of times, which is a couple of white people talking about equity.
Yes, we have.
May I share one strategy for teachers that I learned
Oh, please.
for equity in the classroom? Because this comes out of a mistake that I made and didn't even realize I was doing it. Because I've always thought of myself as a progressive guy and a progressive teacher, and I knew in here that I would not be the kind of teacher who would be quicker to answer questions from boys than from girls. That I would not be the guy calling on the white kids more often than I was calling on the black kids. And is Dejana back?
Dejan is going to be back.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, Dejana, I'm just sharing a little equity strategy for teachers in the classroom. As a white guy who worked in Title I schools for 18 years, and I was 100% sure I would never be that guy, you know, discriminating subconsciously. I was sure I had my bias taken care of. I was 100% woke. And yet, when I did the exercise a lot of young teachers get to do, where a colleague or an administrator comes in and watches you and takes notes, and they actually count how many times you're calling on the boys and how many times you're calling on the girls and how many times you're calling on the white kids as opposed to the brown kids or the black kids. And when I looked at my score, I went home and cried. It was one of maybe 3 times in 18 years I went home and doubted my ability to do the job. And what the guy said was that he noticed it wasn't that I wasn't calling on them when they raised their hands. It was just that these kids had learned through repeated experience that, you know, they weren't going to get called on as much, and so they just weren't raising their hands. And the girls weren't raising their hands as quickly as the boys were. So I actually got rid of the hand raising in my classroom. What I did instead was I went back to a tool I had in my pocket all the time anyway, which is an ordinary deck of playing cards. And what I did was on each card, I wrote the name of one of my kids. And I kept it in my pocket, and I told the kids how I would do this, and it worked out better than I expected for a whole lot of reasons. So what I would do is when I had a question, like say, you know, when you know, we're studying California history, and I'm thinking, okay, and who's that guy that owned that sawmill where that guy found, you know, that guy in near Sacramento, and I'll read, and they see me slowly reaching for my pocket, and they know that I'm going to call someone's name. Now, I don't want to make the kids feel unsafe, because I don't want them to feel like, you know, aha, gotcha. I don't like to play gotcha with my students. So the signal they could give is, if they could do this, means, you know, I don't care to answer at this time. I'm not ready. Please call someone else. So I'm always ready to go on to somebody else. Have a backup. And of course, if somebody's always doing this, then we need to talk. And I tell them that, okay, that means we need to have a talk, you know, maybe at recess if this is happening a lot, because that means you're not paying attention, or you're not understanding, or you need a little more help, or whatever. But the 2 big benefits, one was equity, because now all of a sudden everyone has an equal chance called upon, whether they like it or not. The other nice thing was whenever anybody saw me going like this, all of a sudden everybody's paying attention, because usually if a kid is just kind of halfway into it, they know that as long as they don't raise their hand, they're unlikely to get called out. But when I'm doing this with my cards, it could happen at any time. So it made my behavior management and keeping the kids engaged easier for me. At the same time, it solved my implicit bias on for the kids where I knew that they were going to be more likely to participate.
What a great strategy. And we're quite used to knowing that you have a deck of cards with you at most times.
I love that strategy. That's a great example for all of us educators out there. I mean, we're familiar with the popsicle sticks. I don't know if you have a little tin of popsicle sticks and you write everybody's name on the popsicle sticks and pull out. Another strategy that I used to different various ways of effectiveness is when I gave everybody a whiteboard. And so when I asked a question, everybody writes down an answer on the whiteboard, on their personal whiteboard, and then just shows it to me, so that I know everybody is involved and everybody's doing it.
That's a great idea.
I like that you gave them the ability to opt out of.
And you know, one of the things from this conversation that the parents teaching at home can really take away is the gotcha questions. Because when you mentioned that, Tim, and it made me think about, even through my university years, I hated professors who set up questions and asked you knowing that you had to say, I don't know. And it made them feel bigger in the room and made the rest of us feel smaller. And I think even at home with our kids, asking them questions that can help them think their way through to an answer and not calling them out on the stuff that they don't have off the top of their head.
Yeah.
So Tim, do you have another song that you might be able to share?
Yes. I've always got another song. Let's see. How about another one on today's theme?
I would love that.
Okay. Now, back in 2016, there was a guy on television who was worried that if we did not build a wall across our southern border, that soon we would face a terrible dilemma, that there would be a taco truck on every corner. And I figured, okay, welcome to Los Angeles.
That could work.
But yeah, it works fine for me. It's convenient and tasty, but it made me think about immigration in the sense that the food is where it really, metaphorically and literally hits us in the gut. Because, one of the things that people gave the Italians a hard time for was they always ate those spicy sausages and they put garlic on everything. And of course now, there's garlic. We all put garlic in everything. I don't think I cook anything that doesn't have garlic, except for coffee. So, but the same has been true for every new group that's come into the United States is it's weird, it's foreign, it's different, until we wake up one day and it's as American as apple pie, which, by the way, is Dutch.
Right.
So, anyway, here's a song about that. All these immigrants from Mexico, what's all that about? They're always speaking Spanish, and it really freaks me out. We ought to build a wall, or we'll all be out of luck. And then you'll have to get your lunch from a tasty taco truck. All these immigrants from Italy, they wave their arms and shout. They do it in Italian, and it really freaks me out. We really ought to round them up and send them back to Rome. Or soon they'll be delivering hot pizza to your home. All these immigrants from Ireland, it's really quite a shame. I think they're speaking English, but it doesn't sound the same. Deport them all to Dublin, or I don't know what we'll do when they're serving fried potatoes at every drive-thru. All All these immigrants from the Netherlands, they're actually the Dutch. They settled New York first, but I don't like them very much. We really should deport the Dutch, and here's the reason why. If we don't ditch the Dutch, we'll all be eating apple pie. All these immigrants from Germany, what's all that about? They're always speaking German and it really freaks me out. Deport them all to Dusseldorf or it'll be a shame when our children ask for hot dogs at every baseball game. All these immigrants from England, what's all that about? They're always speaking English and it kind of freaks me out. But they're starving in our winter, so we'll share our food with them. They'll eat venison and potatoes, corn, squash, and tomatoes, like a real American.
That's great. Thank you, Tim. Dejana, we have got to share all of the music that comes from Griffin Ed far and wide because it's provocative and helpful in education. And I think there are some great messages there.
Well, would it be okay if I take just a minute to plug my show Friday night?
Please do.
All right. I was supposed to be flying to Pittsburgh right now to be a guest of honor at a large science fiction convention there. And obviously that's not happening, but they're doing a lot of stuff online. And as part of it, I'm going to be doing an online concert on Friday night, shortly after your meeting wraps up, I think. It'll be about 5 o'clock Pacific time. It's an East Coast thing, so on their time, I'm starting at 8 o'clock. And I'll be going for an hour and doing some songs for kids and for grown-ups, but it's all kid-friendly. And I'll be talking a little bit about Griffin Ed and some of our offerings for the virtual classroom, given that the schools are still going to be doing most of our work at home.
That is fabulous, and I, for one, will be there to hear you. And I think we should post it on our social media. So maybe if you want to put a link, give us a link to it, Tim, we'll make sure we send it out.
I shall. Thank you.
Of course. Dejana, we've run out of time again.
It happens every time. What can I say? What can I say?
So much to talk about and so little time.
So true. So true. But we do want to thank all of you for joining us again for another open conversation. I'm Dr. Dejana, here with Dr. Leah, and thank you for viewing another episode of Teachers for Teachers. That's you, moms and dads. Until the next time, we're signing off.
Thank you. Bye now.